IoT Unplugged, where we talk to industry leaders, innovators, and major players in the Internet of Things, bringing you the best and latest insights. Tune in to learn more. In this episode, I talk to Amy Garland, Business Development Manager at the Helium Foundation, who's on hand to discuss decentralized wireless networks and its intersection with blockchain technology, as well as advantages and applications. Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of IoT Unplugged. Today I'm joined by Amy Garland, Business Development Manager at the Helium Foundation. Amy, thank you for joining me here today.
Yeah, thank you, Caitlin. I'm really excited to be here and chat with you.
Could you just start us off by introducing yourself and talking about your role at the Helium Foundation?
Sure. Yeah, so I do business development at the Helium Foundation. And a little bit of background on what we do as an organization. So we are a nonprofit entity that is dedicated to the advancement and development of decentralized wireless technology. So we mainly focus on the Helium project, which is a decentralized wireless network project that currently supports two different types of network. First being IoT, connects sensors globally, and the second being a cellular network. So our role in the ecosystem as part of this decentralized project is really to work on network stewardship. So we act as a coordination layer for things like improvements and technical changes, which actually come from many different entities and stakeholders within our ecosystem. So we help take all of those proposals and guide them through the process of implementation and voting. So we also work on education and advocacy. We talk to the public sector. We work with all kinds of businesses in the private sector to help increase awareness and just educate people on the power of the technology and how it can be used and leveraged all around the world. And then the third thing that we do is protocol engineering. So we contribute heavily to the underlying enabling technology that supports the network and all of those that build upon it. So in my role doing business development, I have the pleasure of working with a lot of these companies that are operators on the network, and they're building solutions and deploying sensors and are out in the field as experts in their geographies and local regions on how to actually build and deploy these solutions.
Great, thank you for that, Amy. I think it's interesting you mentioned this point around education, because I suppose the overarching topic of our conversation today is going to be about these decentralized wireless networks. Could you summarize what they are and sort of how they differ from conventional networks?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the decentralized network model, really what it does is it allows anyone anywhere to participate in the build out and the growth and the ongoing operations of wireless networks. So within this model, any participating entities can be rewarded for the value that they're providing to their communities and to users that are all around them using the connectivity that they're creating. So whether it's IoT or cellular, users that need coverage in any certain area can really easily deploy their own infrastructure. And then that network is publicly accessible, and they're essentially operating this small piece of a really broad public utility. So if you think of the traditional telco model, where a telecommunications company might raise a bunch of capital or deploy a bunch of capital to purchase hardware, pay really high costs of site acquisition for that hardware and space rental, and then also have teams across these geographies to set up and maintain it, it can be really capital intensive. So this people-powered approach to the build-out of networks really decentralizes this and disrupts that way that it's been done in the past. So people can leverage these assets that they already have, like excess bandwidth and access points for radio infrastructure, cellular infrastructure, and really reduce that barrier to entry to create coverage in different areas. So the really interesting thing that Helium introduces is that as this network is used and as data is transferred through hotspots, whether it's IoT or cellular or another protocol that joins, data transfer costs from the user can actually be paid in tokens directly to that operator instead of that central telco. So essentially, individual deployers provide connectivity to end devices, and they're rewarded for that valuable coverage that they provide.
I like the use of the word people powered that you brought in. I thought that was a nice way of putting it. I guess I'm curious to know how the Helium Foundation came about. Where did this idea come about to sort of challenge this conventional telecommunications model, as you put it?
Yeah, good question. And it's interesting. The Helium network or the company Helium Systems Inc., which is the creators of the Helium network, was actually founded in 2013 with the main goal of just making access to IoT and wireless networks more accessible and less fragmented and convoluted, because at the time it was just a really difficult space. So they actually tried a bunch of different attempts at making this possible. And it wasn't until 2019 when blockchain started to become a little bit more of a household word that it really clicked that this could be a way that it helps solve that problem of how to grow a network to the point where it's actually very useful and very reliable in an area, and kind of solve a little bit of that chicken and egg problem of how to get coverage so that it can actually be used. So in 2019, they launched with the Helium Project, and then the Helium Foundation was spun up a couple years later as a nonprofit entity to take over a lot of that work around governance and decentralizing these processes of, product development and kind of the direction of the network, because Helium Systems Inc., which is now called Nova Labs, they rebranded as a service provider. And they've become more of a service provider both on the cellular and IoT side within this ecosystem of many, many service providers. So the Helium Foundation kind of took over some of that work of general brand management and network stewardship.
I mean, from 2013 to 2019, I think, wow, that's a long period of time, and maybe sort of illustrates the challenges that were happening then. We will, of course, go on to blockchain because you mentioned it, and that's going to be part of our discussion. But before we do, could you talk about, what are the use cases, the applications, and sort of the advantages of decentralized wireless networks today?
Yeah, and I think I alluded to this a little bit in your last question, but one of the main advantages is just this ability to very quickly and cost effectively deploy networks. So if you think of something like cellular, it can be really impactful, especially in areas that are historically underserved by telecommunications companies. So whether it's due to remote or tricky locations or lack of project funding that are in areas that aren't prioritized by central operators, people are able to really take that into their own hands and can deploy coverage where it's needed most really quickly and effectively. And then as they continue to operate that and as people start to use it, they can also reap the benefits of that. So this model really enables a new type of network connection where people can actually control where they get good coverage and where they deploy networks. So it can also be a model that's deployed in collaboration with telcos. So either for similar reasons or to address just the always increasing demands for higher bandwidth and lower latency. In our world today, it's kind of always increasing the expectations that consumers have. So anything that traditional telcos can do to increase that level of service and the quality of connections that people are getting is something that's really important to them. So whether it's incentivizing really targeted deployment in areas that they're not able to reach or it's not financially feasible or for whatever other reason, they can also collaborate with decentralized wireless networks to kind of fill those gaps. So I know you asked about the applications as well, and they're really endless. I think it's easy to grasp on the cellular side. Helium Mobile is the first cellular provider providing services for any phone powered by Helium and then using backhaul into T-Mobile. So it really is ubiquitous coverage as Helium grows. And then on the IoT side, so we completely follow the LoRaWAN standard. For anyone who's not familiar with LoRaWAN, it's long-range wide area network. It's really great for connecting fleets of sensors that require low bandwidth, long battery life. So since we're interoperable with that, we really can tap into a huge ecosystem of hardware, sensors, gateways, software built for IoT. And Helium providers are working on all kinds of projects. We have people working with city officials on things like flood detection to mitigate damages and improve safety. We have folks that are working on animal research projects to protect endangered species. There's all kinds of smart utility projects and logistics. Since Helium has really great coverage in most large metro areas in the US and Europe, it's especially useful for things like smart city applications and tracking. And then we also collaborate with other network operators in the LoRaWAN space to help boost their coverage and reliability for their users.
I know you said that the opportunities are endless and kind of that's what makes it exciting. Has there ever been a project where you've gone, wow, I can't believe they're doing that. I can't believe that this is how they're managing to do that because they're using decentralized wireless networks?
Yeah, I feel that way a lot. One of the very cool things about Helium is that it really is permissionless and can be used by anyone. So we have operators all over the place that are working on these projects that we often don't know about until sometimes they hit the news. And then we say, oh, wow, that's actually on Helium. That's so cool. One that comes to mind, though, that was relatively recent is a project with the city of Valencia is working on a project to target or in an attempt to combat energy poverty. So they have a lot of people within their city that either struggle with heat and temperature or use kind of bad practices and keeping their homes in suitable condition for living. And they have some projects that are being implemented to help educate people and help improve those conditions. And they want to use data to back it up. They want to be able to prove that the work that they're doing is making a difference and test out these methods and really move in the direction that's most valuable for their citizens. So this is a really interesting project because we work closely with their systems integrators that were outputting sensors in all of these homes in order to measure environmental data for, I think it was at least a 2-year project. And as they're going to these homes, they're not able to set up internet connection. They're not able to utilize cellular because it is very high cost in this area. And they said, okay, we need a public network where we don't have to set up our own gateways and backhaul to the internet because we can't. And we're going to try Helium. And they had something like a 99% success rate in deploying these sensors across the city and not having to deploy any infrastructure. So they're able to entirely use public Helium coverage that also is built by their citizens and their constituents in this city. So it's a really cool thing to have projects like this powered by the citizens and people that are living in these cities, and have the government and small businesses and even enterprises deploying on top of it and building these solutions that really make a difference in citizen lives.
So sort of that moment of, wow, this is really cool. This is what it can do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's great to see what people are working on. There's a lot of great stuff in like climate tech and how to combat climate change and wasted resources and all of that stuff. And that all really excites me because it's all very oriented around positive change for the world.
Yeah, that's great. And we will be discussing a project you did in a little while. But just moving on to the topic of blockchain, earlier, you alluded to the impact it's had in relation to these decentralized wireless networks. So I kind of just wanted to pick your brains on how it's helped and how it intersects and how it all works.
Yeah, this is a great question, and it's one that we get all the time, or really any blockchain project probably gets all the time, is why do you need blockchain and why did you choose to use it? And really what it does here is it enables this really powerful ability to have a network of hundreds of thousand gateways operated by, say, tens of thousands of users autonomously managed. So the blockchain facilitates millions of micropayments every day. Every time a sensor, like we talked about those environmental sensors, for example, Every time a sensor transmits a tiny payload of data, typically as small as 24 bytes, and cost a fraction of a cent, that data can be paid not to some central entity, but to that individual or business that is actually hosting that infrastructure. So the blockchain makes it possible to coordinate and constantly improve and iterate on these incentivization mechanisms that are built into really the structure of how this network operates. And then another point is it also allows for this distribution of ownership in a really interesting way that's borderless and permissionless. So it applies to the supply side, where we talk about people that are building and managing this infrastructure, but it also applies to the demand side. So anyone can tap in and leverage this global network of hotspots, build on top of it. So it really does become a collaborative and permissionless public utility to anyone out there that wants to harness it.
Pretty powerful stuff, in short, to sort of summarize what you said, maybe not in the most informative way. Earlier, Amy, you spoke about smart cities being a major application for decentralized wireless networks. I've got a question here about utility management. Of course, being a not necessarily an essential part of smart cities, but just cities as a whole. In your opinion, what are the major challenges that are facing water management or utility management today?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's one that I've actually learned a lot through working with these providers that are addressing these challenges in different places around the world. And I think there's two things that really stand out that come up over and over. One is climate, and the second is aging infrastructure. So when you think about water scarcity and droughts that have been just increasing and increasingly unpredictable as well, it affects the availability of resources, directly impacting citizen quality of life. And it also really can impact fluctuating energy costs that can be really tough on utilities and also tough on those customers that are paying the bills. So over time, as weather and climate change impacts have made this more unpredictable, both short-term and long-term, it can be really damaging to utilities and cities, and it's something that they think about a lot. And then to the second point, a lot of these cities are built a long time ago, and they do have aging infrastructure. So as their systems age and get weaker, it can be increasingly expensive to fix, and it can also take a really long time to identify and pinpoint vulnerabilities when they come up. So if they don't have the right systems in place, things like leaks or issues can go on for a long time and really result in a lot of additional waste. In working with this company, IoTNet, we're looking at some recent studies that actually estimate that 20% of utility water on average is non-revenue water. So it's water that's actually unbilled and is lost to things like leaks or water theft or general ineffective operations, which can be really astounding when you think of these companies' bottom lines.
Well, that's a really good segue, I think, into talking about this project you did with IoTNet. I suppose from the offset, what were you hoping to achieve in this project, and what were the results of it?
Yeah, so this is this is one of those projects, the Helium Foundation, we're really here to support these companies that are building on top of the network. So this company had been working on some projects for a while before we found out about them, and then we realized that this is a really interesting thing that we wanted to help kind of amplify and highlight within our ecosystem. So IoTNet is based in Bulgaria, and they are an end-to-end services provider that works with utilities to tackle these water supply system issues. So they use smart water meter readers that are attached to standard meters, and they transmit data wirelessly. So they provide a full system for these things that do detection of leaks and abnormalities so that companies can really quickly address any issues as soon as they come up. It can also analyze data longer term to provide recommendations for optimizing water flow as they fix and adapt their systems. And then it can also provide automated utility billing, which can save a lot of manual manpower that usually goes into that type of work. So IoTNet had been actually building dedicated LoRaWAN networks for its enterprise customers for a while when they discovered Helium. I think they mentioned since 2019, so coincidentally around when Helium was just starting to get started in the US. And through those years, it found that it's very expensive and takes a long time to build out this infrastructure. So purchasing hardware, maintaining that network, operating the network, it was really slowing down their projects and eating up a lot of their capital. So the CEO discovered Helium and was a little bit skeptical about it at first. So they kicked off a very intensive testing period. They did side-by-side comparisons for over a year, testing the coverage and the reliability of the network. And then after that, they started migrating their sensors over to Helium. So I think they have over 13,000 devices migrated over and another couple fleets coming. So yeah, it was, as far as the results go, IoTNet was able to optimize their solution and network management by using Helium, which is great. But then more importantly, they were able to continue to provide these services and scale these services to customers that are taking these valuable insights to improve their systems and reduce waste in the utility space. And of course, all the environmental benefits that come along with that.
There was a figure, I believe, you mentioned earlier about realizing just how much water was being wasted through this project. Is that right?
Yeah, and that's really a more general statistic. It's hard to quantify exactly how much is being wasted in this specific project. But when you think about just the utility systems globally, and in some places it's being addressed faster than others, but they're all around the world, people struggle with this problem. And, as water becomes more and more of a precious resource, it's going to be increasingly important to address all of these challenges. And utilities really are having to adopt new technologies like IoT and remote sensing and AI to address them.
It's interesting that you as well provided this anecdote about the CEO of IoTNet being skeptical at first and just, doing all this extensive testing. In your experience, how are various companies, whether they're water utility companies or whether it's local authorities, how are they responding to IoT adoption? And would you say they're receptive to upgrading their network as a whole?
I think that they really are. And I think there's two major things that are pushing this adoption forward. Again, we always come back to just the company's bottom lines. They're thinking about, how much money they're making, their revenue, and what's really being lost when they come across these issues. And then the second, which is another one we haven't touched on yet, is corporate responsibility and compliance. Utilities in a lot of the world are actually being forced into IoT. So EU legislation around utilities and building management, where companies actually have to deploy remote monitoring systems in order to comply. And it's still a little bit fragmented and the rules are different in different locations, but local and regional regulations are doing their best to start making sure that companies are doing their part to address these macro issues that the world are facing around things like water. So utilities, among many other verticals in IoT, they're not only open to adopting these new technologies, but they're starting to really have to. So service providers like IoTNet are able to really focus on developing the best-in-class products to support this shift with their expertise. And it's really exciting to see decentralized wireless start to play a big part in that. Companies really are able to focus on what they do best and use this macro coverage that citizens and constituents in these cities have already created.
Yeah, it's exciting to see all the different applications, but as well as the growth. I mean, when going back to that year, you said 2019 was when things really got started for the Helium Foundation, and comparing it to now with all these projects you're doing, I mean, I just, that must be really rewarding for you guys.
It is. It really is. It's the best part of my job is to see these projects be deployed and be successful and be able to, see the impact that they're having on these local communities.
For sure. Before we wrap up, Amy, is there anything that you want to mention to our listeners while we're here?
Yeah, no, just thank you so much for having me on. We're always really excited to talk about how decentralized wireless is being used to improve connectivity. It's a really exciting time in the wireless space, and being part of this shift in infrastructure ownership and seeing it really get to a place where it really can be used. It's reliable and it's useful and it's available really all over the world. So I really encourage people that are curious about it or interested in learning more, or even if you're really skeptical about it, to really dive in and ask questions. Anyone is welcome to reach out to me at any point, or really just hop into our community conversations and get educated or even test it out.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Caitlin. Thanks for having me.
IoT Unplugged.